I think if you are not able to be confident in your own ideas, in the sense that, well, there's this failure case, I think, where people are just really set on trying to defer with the judgment of an idea to other people. They would have an idea and then they would go to other people and basically ask them what they think about it. And if they don't think it's a good idea, they would think it's not a good idea. And I feel like this is really bad because, first of all, at least to me, it seems that very often people don't, well, maybe that's just me bad at explaining, but it seems like very often when people don't like an idea, they don't even understand it. And even if they do understand it, they might think that it's not a good idea for reasons that are just different from what I would think are the most likely reasons this would fail. So I think it's very important that you don't sort of discard your ideas, that you don't, like ideally, you don't want to defer at all to the judgment of other people. Instead, you want to use what they are saying, try to understand what they are saying really well if it seems like there is something coherent there, and then just see how that changes your models about the world and what this change entails in terms of how good of a project any particular project is. So basically, you're not deferring. Instead, you are trying to upgrade your own model of the world and then use that upgraded model in order to determine how good a particular project is. In some sense, there wouldn't be any difference between that person telling you something and you having the same thought yourself. At least I feel like that's the ideal case. Like there shouldn't be anything that is like, I'm feeling bad because these people seem to think this thing I'm working on is bad. I feel like the human brain only has this component because it sucks at changing its mind. If it's really important for you to sort of change your mind because, well, I guess it doesn't even mean that it's correct, but if there was some social situation, like some social norm that needs to be enforced, and you wouldn't be convinced by lots of people telling you that you should, for example, behave in a particular way, then it would probably be bad in terms of inclusive genetic fitness if you were just ignoring them, because then they would probably just kill you. Well, I mean, at least in the ancestral environment. So I guess it makes sense that you would feel bad about this. But I don't really think this makes sense for getting the best possible model of the world that you can have and using that to evaluate your own ideas. But there's definitely a big danger because the brain is so bad by default in updating what it thinks. You really need to make sure, if you're going to ignore other people's emotional impact that they have on you in some sense, the emotional impact that would change your beliefs, which seems like a good thing to do, I think, then you want to make really sure that you actually are able to take in the information that they are telling you and properly evaluating and integrating it into your world model, and then cashing out the changes to your world model in terms of, for example, projects that you're working on, of like how good are they to work on. And maybe if you should think about other approaches, other things that you maybe should work on. I think that has been a major failure mode for me in the past, where I would sort of uncontrollably update on ideas because I was sort of unable to ignore the emotional impact that something had on me when somebody was criticizing an idea I had. And then I would update towards that the idea is not good in a really dumb way where I didn't even understand why this person, like, it was not that this person was articulating a particular model of the world and I was integrating the model of the world, and I was saying, by integrating, I was saying, yes, this model of the world is superior to my model of the world, or like has some important updates. Therefore, I should update my model in the same way. And now I can look at, how does this project seem like? Is this project a good idea to do? Like, that's not at all what was happening. It was more like I was explaining an idea, I got negative feedback, and then I was feeling bad about it, and then I was not working on the idea because I was feeling bad for even thinking about working on the idea, which is such a ridiculous thing to happen. Like, the structure of my brain that made me do this, react in this way, is like basically complete garbage for actually managing to be productive. Like, first of all, the persons normally, the people that I was talking my idea to, they didn't load my model correctly. And when they articulated their thing, I didn't try to understand their model very carefully. I mean, if I had done that, I would probably have noticed that they didn't even understand my ideas. And of course, whatever they're going to say, like if they have a wrong model of my idea, and then they use their models, which might also be wrong, to evaluate that wrong model of my idea, and then generate some feedback, then I would be very surprised if I don't understand this process and understand each of the individual components, that this can even be useful. Like, basically, this is useful if by accident the other person is good at loading a model, loaded your model sort of well enough, and themselves has well enough models such that they can generate something which is in the end actually useful to you, or even makes any sense at all. And it seems like you don't want to leave that to chance. You want to actually understand each of the components. You want to make sure that the other person has loaded your model correctly. You want to make sure that you understand their models and that they actually make sense. And if these two things are given, then you should pay a lot of attention to the feedback that they're giving. Of course, you won't be able to make them understand exactly your idea, probably. Well, or that's like, 80-20 thing, probably. And their models won't be perfect. But still, I feel like you can get to the point where you are like, when you make sure that they understand like some part of your idea sufficiently well, that they can use some model that they have, which is sufficiently different from you, but after you sort of understand it partly, you see that there seems to be something to the model, that then you can basically, well, even then you probably want to understand how does this model, according with the model that they have of my idea, lead to this particular feedback. Could of course still be a problem with the inference procedure that they're using. But if they're like good at reasoning, sort of, then you would expect that they generate useful things. And there could even be another edge case, which is just like they're way better at thinking because they're smarter, they have a bigger brain or whatever. Then, even if they have the exact same model as you of your idea, and they have the same world model as you, they might still be able to generate things that are useful to you. Simply because you wouldn't have thought of them, or it would have taken you a lot longer to think of them. Though I expect this basically never happens in real life. In real life, people have very different sets of models. Not necessarily very different models, but sort of slightly different, that if you run some inference procedure on the model, it sort of ends up somewhere that's very different from where you would end up, even though all of the models might only be sort of slightly be different. In some parts, slightly worse than yours, in some parts, slightly better than yours. And of course, like some background knowledge, the background knowledge might be very different that you can use in order to do some inference procedure, which I guess is part of the world model, but seems like remembering facts seems to be sort of a different set of skills than, but it's some subpart of the world model. World model can be more things like knowing about the dynamics of a particular system that you're modeling. Okay, then just to summarize, I think the correct procedure for getting feedback from other people is, first, you're gonna make sure that they got a good understanding of your model, potentially only like focusing on some subparts of the model that you want to have feedback on. They don't necessarily need to get the entire model. Then you want to make sure that this person actually has a good model of the world that they're then using to generate the feedback. And third, you want to make sure that the inference procedures that they have, that they use on their world model, are also good. And you want to understand that these three things are the case. And then once they generate feedback, you have a high probability that it will be good. Or a different way you can think about it is after they have generated some feedback, you can trace back through, like you could ask the question, why did you say this? What is the generator of this? And then they can say what parts of the word model makes them think this particular thing. What kinds of inference procedures did they use to infer the feedback based on the world model and their understanding of the thing? And then you can sort of go back from that and explore sort of the relevant parts, because understanding the entire world model might be too difficult. Like, especially if you don't know a person really well and don't know that these three properties I was mentioning before of they have a good word model, they have good inference procedures, and they understand your thing correctly, you might not be able to evaluate that quickly. So you can sort of do the trace back from have the feedback and then ask, what in the world model made you generate this? And how did that factor in with your understanding of it, which is in some sense then part of the world model? And what inference procedures did you use to then push out that specific feedback? All right, that seems like a really nice strategy I want to try next time when I'm in a situation where I want to elicit feedback from someone.